The attention performance trinity includes three interrelated components: the mind, the body, and the environment, and it is the key to understanding and improving your attention performance. I'm Dr. Smilik, and you're about to learn another strategy designed to optimize your attention performance. The attention strategy we will discuss at the end of this segment concerns primarily the mind and environment components of the attention performance trinity. Have you ever been bored at work because you found your job understimulating? You know what I mean. Think of those long stretches during which there was nothing much to do and time just seemed to drag on. We can refer to situations that are understimulating as situations of operational underload. Just as excessive multitasking brought on by operational overload can lead to errors, so can understimulation brought on by operational underload. This is because performance is optimal when the level of stimulation is in a Goldilocks zone, not too high and not too low. This fact was discovered long ago and is often referred to as the Yerkes-Dodson law. The Yerkes-Dodson law is shown here in this figure, which depicts performance on the vertical axis and level of stimulation or arousal on the horizontal axis. Notice the resulting function is an inverted U, with optimal performance at moderate levels of stimulation, poor performance at higher levels of stimulation, corresponding to moments of overload, and poor performance at lower levels of stimulation, corresponding to moments of underload. But why does performance tend to decline at low levels of stimulation? Let's explore this with a short demonstration. You're going to see a sequence of letters presented on the screen with hash signs inserted between the letters. A letter will be presented roughly every 1.5 seconds, and your task is to clap as fast as you can to every letter except for the letter C. So you will see something like this. In this example, you would clap to the letters D and F, but not to the letter C. Of course, there would be a lot more letters in the sequence, with at least a few C's in the series, so keep going until the letters stop being presented. Okay, get your hands ready to clap. Remember, you have to clap for every letter except for the letter C, and try to clap as quickly as you can upon seeing the letter. Don't be slow. On-time performance is important in your industry. Here we go. Although this task seems like it ought to be quite easy, many of you clap to the letter C even though you were not supposed to. Erroneously clapping to the critical letter C is actually quite common. This task is in fact a variant of a task used in the scientific literature called the Sustained Attention to Response task, abbreviated as the SART. Variants of this task are often used to study people's ability to sustain attention on a given task. Why do people fail to stop themselves from clapping to the critical letter in this task? The available evidence suggests that the rhythmic and repetitive nature of the task quickly engages the habit system of the brain, and you begin to think about something other than responding to the specific letter that appears. You might be thinking, "This is easy," or "I wonder what the point of this is." As you begin to think these thoughts, you actually interfere with your ability to identify the critical letter C in time to stop yourself from responding. To help us explain this, let's go back to the conscious executive system and the limited pool of attentional resources we discussed in another segment. Remember, the limited pool of attentional resources is shown here as this rectangle, which you can think of as a vat full of resources. In the case of the SART, successfully preventing a clap on the critical letter C requires that the attentional resources be applied to the task of identifying letters and deciding whether to respond. However, because the task is so easy and repetitive, you offload some of the work onto the habit system, which quickly learns to clap in rhythm with the presentation of the letters. As this occurs, some of the attentional resources are diverted from the task and applied to internal thinking. You can call this internal thinking mind wandering or off-task thought. I really want to emphasize this key point. The attentional resources consumed by mind wandering are the same as those used by most attentionally demanding tasks involved in operating a vehicle. So engaging in mind wandering while you are doing a primary task is just like multitasking. Okay, back to our clapping task. Since everything seems to go by just fine and you're responding to every letter, the brain tries to offload more of the work onto the habit system, and more resources are diverted to internal thinking. Critically, as long as the critical letter C doesn't appear, you might not even notice your attentional resources have slipped away from the task and onto task-unrelated thoughts. However, when the critical letter C appears, there might not be enough resources left to process the critical letter in time to stop the response. At this point, the odds of making an error drastically increase. Furthermore, when you do make the error, you might even feel surprised that you failed because you didn't even notice that your attention had momentarily wandered off the task. So let's relate this all back to moments of operational underload. Moments of operational underload are problematic because they encourage attentional disengagement from a primary task, and the attentional disengagement can come in the form of mind wandering. Having considered the impact of mind wandering on performance, let's now consider the case of a paratransit bus accident, which you might have seen in another one of our training segments. This news footage includes a view of the bus driver as well as a view from the front of the bus. Notice that the bus driver is looking straight ahead. He's not distracted by a cell phone or passengers. Evidently, he was not on drugs and he wasn't asleep. Yet surprisingly, he didn't even attempt to stop the bus before it plowed into a bunch of cars. How can we explain this accident? Simple. Mind wandering. The bus driver likely allowed his mind to wander, which meant that his attentional resources were consumed by mind wandering and were not on the task of driving. As he was driving, he was likely relying on his habit system. And here's the important part. When the mind wanders, it consumes attentional resources that are required for conscious perception of the external environment. That is, when you're lost in your thoughts, you become functionally blind. Let me say that again. When your attentional resources are diverted toward mind wandering, you can fail to consciously see things that are right in front of you. And that is why the driver plowed right into a bunch of stationary cars while his eyes were looking right at them. Remember, while fixating an object with your eyes is a necessary precondition for seeing the object, it is not enough. You also have to apply the attentional resources to process the object in order to consciously perceive it. All this wouldn't be that important if mind wandering was not very frequent. However, it appears that exactly the opposite is true. It turns out that mind wandering is strikingly common in everyday life. In a large study published in the top journal Science, people were asked at different times of the day via their smartphones whether they were, at that exact moment, mind wandering. The researchers found that people reported mind wandering almost half of the time they were asked. Such a high rate of mind wandering has been found in many other studies as well. In the last 10 years, the research community has learned a lot about mind wandering, and some of the discoveries are directly relevant to safety in the transportation industry. Let's look at some of the relevant findings. There's a mountain of evidence showing that across many situations, mind wandering is more likely to occur during very easy tasks than during difficult tasks. So as we already noted, moments of operational underload are particularly problematic. Research has also shown that while operating a vehicle, mind wandering is more common when the operator is on a familiar route than when he or she is on an unfamiliar route. This was noted in a recent study conducted by Matthew Yanko and Thomas Spalek. In their abstract, they write, "Inattention is a major cause of traffic accidents. Here we show that contrary to common sense expectation, familiarity with a route is itself a source of driving impairment. This effect may be attributed to increased mind wandering along familiar routes." So you are particularly vulnerable to mind wandering on familiar routes, where the task of operating your vehicle seems easier because it is offloaded onto the habit system. The available evidence also suggests that it's important to distinguish between mind wandering that is intentional and mind wandering that's unintentional. As the names imply, episodes of intentional mind wandering are those you choose to engage in. Episodes of unintentional mind wandering are those that just occur despite your best efforts to focus on a task. It turns out that in many contexts, a sizable proportion of mind wandering episodes are intentional in nature. This is actually really good news because now that you know that these are problematic, you can just deliberately decide not to engage in them. Research has also shown that during moments of underload, mind wandering tends to increase with time on task, which is shown here in this image. As time goes by during a workday, attentional resources are more likely to shift from being on task to being on task unrelated thoughts. As mind wandering increases over time on task, performance tends to decrease. The reduction in performance over time on task has been documented in numerous studies and is referred to as the sustained attention decrement. Mind wandering can also vary in depth, and the depth of mind wandering can change from moment to moment. Typically at the beginning, a person can experience relatively shallow moments of mind wandering. But if the mind wandering is left unchecked, the person can begin to experience much deeper levels of mind wandering. Therefore, it is critically important that you catch yourself while you're in the early stages of mind wandering. In the beginning stages of mind wandering, you can still notice that your mind is beginning to wander off task. In the later stages, you might fail to even notice you have disengaged. This brings us to another important attention strategy that you can implement to prevent attention-related errors. You must recognize situations of operational underload, reduce mind wandering, and maintain active engagement. You can reduce mind wandering by, first of all, preventing intentional moments of mind wandering, since these are directly under your conscious control. To reduce unintentional mind wandering, you should frequently evaluate your attentional focus to catch mind wandering during its early stages. This is Dr. Smilik reminding you that attention strategies only work if you take the initiative and regularly implement them. Don't be passive and risk committing a catastrophic error. Be active and practice your attention strategies each and every day.